Well, hey there, and welcome back to my channel. In this video, we're going to do our best to summarize everything you need to know about World War II. One of our required topics here on this channel, so if you're ready to get them brain cows milked, then let's get to it. Okay, first things first. When did this war start and end? Well, it began in 1939 when Germany invaded Poland. And that action kicked off a massive land war in Europe that would eventually involve every single nation on the planet. That's right, this was truly a global war. And so who were the major players on each side? Well, for the Axis powers, you had Germany, Italy, and Japan. Leading the charge for these various countries were three big bad boys: Hitler, Mussolini, and Tojo. For the Allies, you had Britain, the Soviet Union, and the United States. And these countries were led by Churchill, Stalin, and FDR, though Harry Truman will become the US president during the latter part of the war. You should also know that eventually almost every nation on Earth joined one side or the other. Okay, now let's talk about some key events that you should absolutely know about. First, there's the Battle of Stalingrad. This was a brutal fight between the Axis and the Soviets that resulted in hundreds of thousands of casualties on both sides. It's considered the turning point of the war because after this battle, the tide completely turned against the Axis. In fact, Germany would never win another battle. Second, you have D-Day, which took place in 1944. This was the Allied invasion of France that marked the beginning of the end for the Axis. In just a few short years, France would be liberated. Third, there's the attack on Pearl Harbor. This was the Japanese attack on a US naval base that brought the United States into the war. Japan thought that by attacking this naval base, they would cripple the US fleet and thus be able to take over the Pacific. But it actually had the opposite effect, as this attack unified the American people and brought them into the war. And fourth, you have the event at Hiroshima. This was the atomic bombing of Japan that ultimately led to their surrender and the end of the war. Prior to this, the United States had dropped a second atomic bomb on Nagasaki, and the Soviets had declared war on Japan. Facing certain defeat, the Japanese surrendered. Now before we move on, let's talk about something really horrible that happened during the war, and that was the Holocaust. This was the genocide of 6 million Jews by the German government. At the start of the war, there were around 9 million Jews living in Europe. By the end of the war, only 3 million remained. And so he and his buddies systematically deported Jews to concentration camps where they were murdered. Okay, now let's finish up by talking about the final outcome of the war. As I mentioned earlier, the Allied forces were led by Britain, the Soviet Union, and the United States. And together, they overwhelmed the Axis powers and defeated them. Germany was divided into 4 occupation zones, controlled by the United States, Britain, France, and the Soviet Union. Japan was also occupied by the United States after they surrendered. In addition to suffering terrible military defeats, both Germany and Japan had been devastated by the atomic bombs. And so as the war ended, these two nations would quickly begin the process of rebuilding. The Soviet Union also began to rebuild, but they would soon enter into a period known as the Cold War with the United States. Okay, that's what you need to know about World War II. I've got videos on all the required topics right here. Click some of those and get those brain cows milked. And if you want me to keep making these videos, then by all means subscribe and I shall oblige.